This is the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by thehoosier.com. Before we jump into this video, pause it right now and go subscribe to the Hoosier.com website, now a part of On3 Sports, for exclusive content covering the Indiana Hoosiers, including exclusive interviews, live recruiting updates, and much more. Make sure to join our community. We really appreciate it.
And Hoosier Nation, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button here on our YouTube page. We got plenty of more content on here, including more talking about the Hoosiers podcast episodes, recruiting highlights, press conferences, and much, much more. It literally takes 2 seconds. Just do it right now, get it over with, and then go on and let's enjoy this new episode.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by The Hoosier. I'm joined by Kyler Staley. I'm Drew Rosenberg. Not so much a welcome back for Kyler, I guess, because you've been on the show. I think last week we did a podcast, or you and Zach did a podcast. So my kind of return after a little hiatus.
Yeah, we'll just say this: Drew and I haven't done a podcast, just us two, in a while. So there hasn't been any breaking news or anything like that. But Zach and I did a podcast last week. I think last weekend, I want to say it was like right after the first live period weekend. So I do encourage people to go back and check that out and stuff. We had some good thoughts on all the recruits that I was looking at off the spring evaluation live period weekend. So we got another one coming up. The first summer one's probably going to be here soon, so where the coaches can be out and stuff like that. But good episode. I highly suggest you go check it out.
Yeah, right after you guys watch this one, literally just go to the Talking About the Hoosiers playlist on our YouTube channel and, watch the video or watch any of the videos back, including our reactions to all the commitments, recruitments, all that stuff. We have you covered there. But jumping into the actual podcast and us, we're here actually to talk about. Last night was the, Hoobers NIL event. I think it was the new bourbon they had out, but also it was a chance for us to hear from Darian DeVries and Curt Cignetti. But I think we're just going to focus on Darian DeVries. Shannon Griffin, Coach Griff, is going to have you guys covered. So this is going to come out after, but he is, I guess, last night we'll do a live stream with me talking about Curt Cignetti's comments in Indiana football going into the summer. So if you missed that, go check it out. But Darian DeVries had some key quotes and, said a lot. I think it was our first time hearing from him since his opening press conference and since the roster has been kind of built. So it was really good to, finally get to hear him.
Yeah, it was. And the Huber event, at Huber's Winery down in Borden, Indiana, that's a great event every single year because it's your first fan event. It's pretty much, other than maybe a few camps here and there or something like that, it really is just the first true fan event of the summer. And with Hoosiers Connect putting it on, it's a big NIL event. It's probably the biggest of the summer, if I had to imagine. There was hundreds of people there yesterday. I would even say probably close to 1,000 on Wednesday night, there for Cignetti, there for DeVries. Obviously, your first chance to, as a fan, get to hear DeVries live and in person. Media availability was also there. So, all the media guys got to interview him as well. Cignetti, a lot of hype with him. Last year, it was your first time listening to him. And then this year, it's your first time listening to him live with the fans and stuff after a tremendous football season. So it's a great, great event. It's great for the media. It's great for the fans. It's just great to kind of, I guess, what am I looking for? There's a long off season, right, for both Indiana basketball and football. It's just a nice little placeholder and something that fans can look forward to, during this long summer period.
Yeah, and before we move on to DeVries, Curt Cignetti was in peak Curt Cignetti form.
He's a hoot.
Yeah, he is. It's really funny because, people think it. I think, when you first hear the quotes, you hear the Google me, you hear, the confidence, how kind of overconfident he is in a way. And you think it's a little bit of a bit. He's, just playing kind of just doing it for the media. But no, that's just who Curt Cignetti is. And last night was just another example. So if you haven't watched that video, we have it on this on the Hoosier on 3 YouTube. So make sure you check that out too. But jumping into
hold on, Drew. Before we go there, my favorite part of that whole thing was the very beginning of the video. Talked about the roster management. Are you satisfied with the roster and stuff? He's like, I would have liked to have signed a few more guys, but with Darian's roster, he kind of lost his whole team, so money was a little tight going here. So I thought that was great. It sounds like him and Darian DeVries have a really strong relationship. So, and your hope is that, these two are going to be the leaders of Indiana athletics for a long, long time. So it's just fun banter to see, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I saw some people taking that seriously on the internet, which was pretty funny to see because I was like, it could not have been more obvious Kurt Signetti was making a joke, and it was a funny one at that. But jumping into DeVries, and I think the perfect place to start is with his son, Tucker DeVries. We kind of got we saw the video, the shooting video. You did a story on it, I believe.
Zach did that.
Zach did a story. So, but Darian DeVries said last night, for the most part, we're getting closer, but he's able to do all the shooting drills, drill works, lifting, but it's modified a bit. But by the time we get rolling here in the next week, he should be cleared for full contact and be good to go there. By next week, Indiana's starting their summer practice in the lead up to the Puerto Rico stretch. If you haven't seen anything on that, we have you on the website as well. But Kyler, it's Tucker DeVries seems like he's going to be 100% for the season. I know there was, some concerns. I personally was never really concerned, but him having, most of a full off season is a really good sign for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I posted, Alec and I kind of tag teamed a video story on Tucker DeVries getting an off-season workout. Just earlier this week, I think it was, but he looked good. He looked like he's back to full strength and full, health as far as, the non-contact stuff, right? Darian DeVries giving a good, update on him. He looks like he's going to be ready to go when it comes to the summer workouts, which is big. I'm curious. It didn't seem like Darian DeVries really gave any update on Connor Enright. He's also coming off an injury as well. So don't really know where he stands at as far as the summer workouts can go. But, Tucker DeVries, you can make a strong case. He's probably the biggest pickup for Indiana this offseason, player-wise and stuff. So he's going to come in. He's going to be probably the main guy more often than not, with Lamar Wilkerson as well. He's just going to be a lights-out shooter, man. He's going to be a lights-out scorer, and he's going to play a very, very big role. This guy, in my opinion, is an NBA guy. He really is. I'm not saying he's going to get drafted, but he's got the body type. He's got the longevity, the way that he plays to have a long pro career in the NBA. And, Indiana's going to have, the pleasure of having him on their team for a full season, hopefully, barring any injuries. And I think he's going to play a very, very key piece to how successful Indiana is going to be this season.
Yeah, I mean, the word is, that's been used so often, it's versatility, and Tucker DeVries is another guy that, he can play a ton of different positions on the floor for Indiana. You kind of slot him in as likely, the starting three, probably the starting three alongside Lamar Wilkerson and Tatum Conaway is like those guys lead the backcourt. But he's a guy who can play some small ball for it. It's no secret, the top end, like the top size on the roster, I'm just going to jump in. DeVries talked about it. He said he likes the size across the board for the most part, a little undersized at center. And with that, Tucker DeVries is a guy that can play multiple positions. And you look at the whole roster, it's a lot of guys like that. And yeah, a little small at the center. But when you're bigger, the 1 through 4, it can help make up and offset some of that size.
Yeah, I think Tucker DeVries is just going to be a guy that you can just put in any position, right? And he's going to succeed, right? And you look at what he did at Drake, he was a stud. You look what he did for the time that he was in West Virginia, being able to play, he was a stud. He was the main guy for them. It's going to be – it's a crucial piece. When you got Darian DeVries coming in as your new head coach, you knew that his son Tucker DeVries was going to be right behind him and stuff. And what people kind of forget, and I even forget too, is – he still has a medical waiver that he's trying to get approved, right? And people kind of forget about that a little bit. So I don't think that he has to stress out or anything like that or whatnot. But it's a good update. It's good to see that he's on the right track. He's going to be a critical part for Indiana basketball, not only this summer, but obviously I guess we can jump right on into the international trip that Darian DeVries also talked about as well. But it's going to be nice to see him on the floor, and I think he's going to really, really help Indiana in a lot of different areas this season.
Yeah, DeVries, you mentioned the international trip, so I'm just going to read the quote. The nicest part about taking that trip is the 10 extra practices, so we can spread it out and do maybe one a week and do some extra film work, extra install, something that may just take some extra time when you have those 4 hours a week, just some time to spend together when you have a new group to build that cohesiveness on and off the floor, so it's a terrific time to do that. That's something I didn't know. I didn't know that if you do one of those international trips, you get 10 extra practices. So it kind of makes me wonder, why isn't every single school doing an international trip if you're able, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, and of course you've got every 4 years you can do one, right? You can't do one every
Yeah.
year.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
So that kind of makes a whole lot of sense. So, but still, there's still a lot of high profile teams that still don't do that. I know Purdue would do those or not. I think the last one that they did was probably, I think, up in Canada. It was for like Zach Edey and stuff that they play like the Canadian national team or something like that. I know Kentucky with Calipari would do that quite a bit back in the day and stuff. Indiana did one in the Bahamas 4 years ago. It was Mike Woodson's very first year. So you can see the parallels there. It was Mike Woodson's first year, almost a brand new team. Darian DeVries, completely brand new team. Nothing really, nothing reoccurring with this Indiana team from last year. So it's really important. I think it's a really, really good trip and stuff. And they play some good talent, at Puerto Rico. You play the pro team, you play, and I can't even think of what that other team was called, but it's some talented guys and stuff. And it's just great, the 10 extra practices. That's awesome. That's just more time on the floor, more time to, build that chemistry on the floor with this team. And DeVries kind of talked about it a little bit as well. I know it's not in the quote, but it's also kind of just like a nice team building trip, right? It's a relaxing trip as well. And they get to be around each other, both on and off the floor and stuff. But for a coaching standpoint, from a playing standpoint, you get your guys out on the floor. You get to play some live competition against guys that you won't ever see again. Not this season or anything like that. You'll see them just one time, on this Puerto Rico trip, and you can play around with different lineups. You can see what works, what doesn't work, and then you can go into the fall part of it and stuff, and then kind of tweak some things there and get ready for the actual season.
Yeah, I mean it's good for you have a completely brand new group. That's when you look at this roster, they're going to be behind in November of a team like compared to Purdue, a team that's bringing a lot back and has a lot of cohesiveness already. So getting obviously the extra practices, the extra game time, and being able to go on a trip together, like the off the court stuff, I think it matters just as much because a lot of these guys, they might have played against each other at some point in their lives, but they've never been teammates. This group of 10, right, or 12, right? Wait,
11.
Yeah, it's going everywhere but 11. But though these guys haven't been together as one team yet, and having that time together, even if it's them, doing the stupid stuff that they're probably going to do in Puerto Rico, that's good for it's good for them to build that connection, that cohesiveness, because it's only going to translate on the floor is them building that relationship off the floor.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, in this NIL era. You need as much on court, off the floor chemistry building as you can possibly have. And this Indiana team, with summer workouts starting next week, the team's going to be, on campus in Bloomington and stuff. That's when you're going to start really building that bond. Of course, there's probably been a big group text and everything like that. Those guys are excited to play with each other. I did see Tatum Conaway and Lamar Wilkerson have been working out together for a little bit. So that's great because that's probably going to be your starting backcourt, right? So already building that kind of chemistry and playing off of one another is going to be huge. So I'm excited to see what this Indiana team can do in this international trip. I do advise, like I do with the very beginning parts of the season stuff, don't take it seriously if you're an Indiana fan because these results don't matter and it's not going to affect anything, good or bad. So it's just going to be nice to see these guys, play for the first time, get on the floor and just see kind of what this team is about.
Yeah, you said it, I'm going to reiterate that point. These results do not matter. Indiana could win by 50 or lose by 20. Does not matter at this point in time. Kyler, do you remember Indiana's preseason game against Tennessee this past year?
I do, and that was very telling. That's a great point right there, Drew.
Indiana won that game. We had I think a lot of people had a lot of belief after that game. We're like, oh, this team could be legit. And you saw the season Tennessee went on to have it versus the season Indiana went on to have, two very different directions.
Oh yeah.
So the point of these games do not matter in the slightest.
How did Indiana beat Tennessee last year on the road with the guy Ziegler? He was playing, right?
He was playing.
And I think was it Bryson Tucker maybe wasn't playing and stuff, and Indiana had a couple guys that was out and stuff. But man, just completely opposite directions of two programs right there.
Yeah, it was. So again, the important thing to take is no matter what happens in the Puerto Rico games, the fact they're playing it and they're together and doing this stuff, positive. Win or loss at this point in time does not matter. They're still working out every single possible kink there is. But speaking of working out the kinks, Darian DeVries also talked about, the final pieces of the roster. It's no secret, Goody and Anthony Leo are waiting on waivers. So I'll read that quote, and then I'll kind of go into the second part. On Goody and Leo's waivers, DeVries said their waivers are still in process. My understanding is there are a ton of waivers that have been filed, so there's a bit of a backup there. So from a timing standpoint, we don't have a ton of clarity on when those decisions will be made. Obviously, the sooner the better, but it's a bit out of our control. So no real news there. It's kind of just the same old, as you and I both know, there's so many, waivers that the NCAA is going through right now. When Goody and Leo's will come, or won't come, we'll know when it happens, is kind of the feeling we're getting right now.
Yeah. Based off of what DeVries says, we can only assume that he knows just about as much as anybody, right? And he's kind of, the same standstill as the fans are, both Leo and Goody as well. There is a backup. There's a lot more waivers this year than there have been any other year. With that lawsuit going on right now and stuff. A lot of players like Zakai Ziegler, we just mentioned him and stuff. He's a guy that's suing the NCAA, even though that guy played 4 seasons, full seasons, has no really any really way he could say I missed part of this season or anything like that. Now he played 4 seasons completely. And he's trying to sue for that extra year and stuff because, NIL there, there's a lot of money to be made with a lot of these guys. Luke Goody, we all knew what the situation was going into this offseason. He was always going to apply for that. He made that clear last year. When he came to Indiana, he's going to apply for that. He's got that, kind of, on his defense, he missed a large part of his sophomore year, and he was just over the percentage of where you automatically get one just by a hair, by 0.03%. There's his case and stuff. He's the guy that I would imagine would get that waiver, right? The only thing that, is kind of hurting him is that he came back, right? He got hurt at the beginning of the year, came back at the end of the year, but I don't think he should be punished regardless of that. Anthony Leals is a very interesting one that kind of came out of nowhere because he played 5 seasons with Indiana. And his case is, there was a few seasons where he didn't see the floor a whole lot and stuff like that. There's a lot of similar waiver claims out there for a lot of players in the college basketball and stuff. But obviously it looks like, and I know you'll read this next part as well, about the other few roster spots and stuff, but it looks like that, they're kind of holding out a little bit, for them and stuff. And, they're going to honor their process and they're going to see if they can get those guys, because if you do get those guys, you get 2 guys that have been in the program that know what it's like for Indiana basketball. And you got your 2 leaders right there, right off the bat. So it would be really, really good gifts to have both of those guys back, but it's still a waiting process. But I would imagine sooner than later, you'll see something out of these guys.
Yeah, you mentioned it, so I might as well just read DeVries' quote. We're still actively recruiting to see what fits and makes sense. We can kind of go a lot of different directions. The way the roster stands today, we still have this 2 extra spots, so we'll see how that plays out. I mean, you were there. I watched the videos. He, very clearly is waiting on those waivers. If Anthony Leo and Goody's waiver, get approved, those are going to be the final 2 guys. If not, it seems like he has some ideas. It seems like he held back some scholarship spots he mentioned as well, waiting on this decision. So it seems like he's getting a little impatient to an extent too. And I think we all are, because at some point, you got to know what you need to do. In 2 spots, it's not nothing. It's, and Anthony Leo and Luke Goody are 2 impact players. So it's figuring out, hey, am I going to have these 2 guys, or do I need to go elsewhere and find, 2 guys who can fill that role? So I get the impatience a little bit from DeVries. I get it completely.
Yeah, I would say, to me personally, I don't know if it's impatience, but he definitely does have a timeline, right, that he kind of wants to abide by. He's doing a really good job of respecting both Goody and Leals. They want to come back to Indiana, right? And, those are 2 guys, from a culture standpoint and stuff, and what they can provide on the floor, obviously. Those are 2 guys you want in your program, right? Especially for a first-year head coach, at Indiana, having 2 guys, where Indiana means the world to them. And you look at last year, those were the 2 guys that were pretty much the leaders towards the end of the season. And they were the ones, waving the Indiana flag and stuff, and, taking a lot of, the criticism and stuff like that. Those guys were there, defending their team and stuff like that. So, But at the same time, at some point you got to fill your roster, right? And you got to do what's best for your team in general, right? So I do think that he does have a timeline. I think that they are still actively recruiting, like you just mentioned, sending out feelers and stuff like that, trying to make sure their options are still there. There's still a ton of players still left in the portal. I'm not saying you're going to be able to right now to go get guys that are going to make true impacts for your team right now. I think he's got those guys already set in stone. But at the same time, you got to fill those roster spots, right? You don't necessarily have to, but you'd be stupid not to. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's taken a long time. I think it's ridiculous how long it's taken, even though there are a ton of waivers out there. I get it from the NCAA standpoint, but is May 29th, and we're getting ready to start summer workouts, and you don't have most of your waivers already determined on what you're going to do and stuff. I think that's just a little ridiculous, and it's unfair to a lot of these players that are trying to either come back to college or move on, seeing what their options are and stuff. But it's just a waiting game. It's a wait and see type of thing, and hopefully sooner than later we have answers with all of it.
Yeah, it's unfair to the players and coaches. The coaches, they want to hold out for their guys, but at a certain point you have to move on. And these players, if they get moved on, they could lose their spot, lose their last chance to play next year. And it's really difficult. But moving on from there, Darian DeVries, he had some interesting comments too about his, recruitment strategy and kind of what he looks for. And, obviously the obvious things he mentioned, skill, IQ, all that stuff. But it's kind of interesting, a little deep dive into his mind. He said, we want guys that are about the right things, good team guys, got a good feel, IQ, and skill level that we look for. Does it fit? How we want the roster to look like. We feel like we're in a good place with a lot of the guys we're recruiting and very excited about that. It's winning players is one of the factors, but it's not what, it's not what they have to have. Over the years, we've taken guys that maybe come from a team that wasn't as successful the year before, but it's always an added benefit. Like they're able to help their team win. That's a great quality to have as well. But we don't make it that it is the guys we look for. It's always nice when you can collect as many guys who know how to win because those qualities shine through pretty quickly. He also said along the lines of, sometimes guys are in a situation where they're not as successful, but that's not really their fault and they're doing what they can. So it's not the end all be all, winning, but when he's looking for these recruiting transfers and high school players, but it, clearly seems to have an importance in his mind.
Yeah, I think, with any successful program now, it's all about balance, right? And obviously when you're recruiting the high school guys, you can't guarantee that those guys are going to stay for the long haul, right? And that's just with the transfer portal era, the NIL era. That's just how it's going to be, right? But he definitely does have specific players that he's recruiting, right? Culture pieces and stuff. He's not going to go out there and just get the highest rated guys, and I'm not, knocking Woodson and stuff, but that was kind of his recruiting strategy, right? Get the most talented on paper guys, regardless of the fit, just get those guys on roster and see if it works out. Didn't really work out the last 2 years, right? It didn't work out. His first 2 years, luckily he had Trace Jackson Davis and all the pieces just fell around him and stuff. Last 2 years, Woodson's, one of his biggest problems was he just put a lot of talent on there, hoped it worked out for the best. It just didn't work out. But DeVries obviously has a clear direction on how he wants to do that. He wants to have, I think it was Kenny Johnson too last night that I saw on Twitter also said, we want Indiana, we want the high school players to be the backbone of the program. We want them to be the culture setters, right? They want to recruit guys that are going to be there hopefully for a few years and stuff at least. And then you obviously fill in the pieces with, the transfer portal guys, the guys that help you win right away. And I think that's how it is with any successful program nowadays. You've got to have a good balance of both. You can't just rely on the transfer portal. Another thing is like he's relying heavily on the transfer portal and stuff. You need to rely on that to a certain extent. But at the same time, if you can build a great culture and you can have guys that stick around, that want to be there, that are getting paid right and whatnot and stuff, those are the type of guys you want in your program. And I think that's what DeVries is going after. He's going after some very highly talented guys too. Don't get me wrong. But often he's extended 4 or 5 stars, 2026, 2027 class. Those are some top-notch players and stuff. But he's not offering every single one of them, right? He's not offering all the 5 stars. He's going after the particular 5 stars, the 4 stars that would fit his system well, the positional versatility, the type of kid that they are, where their parents, where they come from, the culture that they have and stuff. But I think he's doing all the right things right now. Obviously, it's very, very early in his tenure as Indiana head coach, but as far as his recruiting pitches are concerned, what he's doing right now, I think he's setting himself up for success and the Indiana program.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, you can't judge him now. He has not recruited a single high school basketball player yet. The transfer portal, we've seen what he's been able to do there. But from a high school recruiting standpoint, the only, high school player Indiana's bringing in next year is Trent Sicily. It's a guy that was committed to Mike Woodson. I can't say this is fact, but I think there's a lot of people that could have been head coach of Indiana, and Trent Sicily would have committed to IU. I think he just is he's a Hoosier. He's just someone who's always wanted to play for this program. So it didn't seem like it was, a lot of work for Darian DeVries or even Mike Woodson to get his commitment. But seeing what DeVries is doing, throughout the summer and the coming months, because he mentioned it, there's going to be some visits that are, on the radar pretty soon. He's going to start hosting these high school guys, and so seeing that and who is actually coming is going to be, something to monitor moving forward. And I'm excited because DeVries, it's a very different, it's a change of pace. I know we keep beating the dead horse, but DeVries is at all these events. He's at the AU tournaments. He's at the state championship in Indiana. He is going to watch these players play. Not every coach does that, even though you'd think every coach is doing that. There was a lot of coaches that weren't doing it, and it was a problem with Indiana when it came to especially in-state recruiting. So I think having, a guy like DeVries, who everyone has said he's a grinder, and we're seeing it firsthand. He is everywhere, and he's always on the phone, especially during the transfer portal, on the phone constantly, working the phone again, working hard to build the roster. So it's a change of pace, which is a really nice change of pace for Indiana basketball.
He's a ball coach. That's my favorite saying about DeVries. He's a ball coach, right? He's all business and stuff. And you are right. He is always on his phone. Saw that firsthand. So very, very busy guy. But yeah, I think he's doing all the right things, man. And he's going out there and he's recruiting these guys. And I want to talk about obviously the visits and stuff that he's already got set in stone, for June. June looks like it's going to be a very, very busy visit month. They're going to have a lot of guys, on campus and stuff, a lot of guys that I think Indiana realistically could get. So I think he's doing a good job with it. I can't say anything more about it and stuff. I think he's just kind of right now, you just wait and see how it plays out and stuff. But, this season aside, I think you're going to see a good balance of high school guys and transfer portal guys. And hopefully, in the next 3 years or whatever and stuff, it's going to really balance itself out.
Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to because, you said it, he's a ball coach. So a lot of, this kind of ties into the next quote anyways, fan base and expectations. And DeVries understands, I'm just going to read the quote because it's better than any paraphrase I can do. The fan base is very passionate about it. They want to win, and we want to win. We're in alignment there, and that's a good thing. We always tell people you want a fan base very passionate about their team, and they care. That's what we have, and we're excited to have them be a part of this, and we have those same expectations, so we're going to do everything we can to live up to those. I also want to add, Signetti kind of talked about it too. Signetti was another guy who was like, DeVries wants to win. They want it bad. It might take some time, but they want it. And I think this is, a little for everyone. It's everybody wants this program to succeed, who is a part of it, who's around it, who, supports it. There isn't a person who's rooting against this program. You might not always agree with what DeVries is going to do. It's, I know a lot of people didn't agree with a lot of Woodson's things he did, even though Woodson always just wanted to win. And it's the same thing with DeVries. It might take time. It's year one of a rebuild. I guess it's the rebuild year. It's year one. I know a transfer portal. We saw Signetti do it in football, but it's not, it's apples and oranges. It's not the same thing. So it might take some time, but DeVries, he's a grinder. He wants to win. And, him and the fan base, it seems like very aligned on that mentality.
Things take time, right? And, the NIL era, it's pretty easy to say that, it shouldn't take time. And you're absolutely correct on a lot of that. It shouldn't take as much time as it normally would. But, there's going to be some growing pains, at some point this season, right? There was growing pains with Mike Woodson's first year, and that was really kind of the first year that this NIL stuff kind of really started taking place. So, but yeah, I think, this fan base is hungry. They were hungry for a good football program, a great football program. It looks like they got one long term with Signetti. DeVries doing all the right things, the recruiting aspect of it, the way that he's going about things, and just, setting up his roster, setting up success, setting up his staff. I think he's doing the right things. And this, at the end of the day, winning cures everything, right? Yeah. There's not going to be a lot of complaints as long as Indiana's winning basketball games. And that's just something they haven't consistently done in a long, long time. And if DeVries can go in there, if he can establish his system, establish his culture, and win games, everything will take care of itself and stuff. But it's going to take a little bit of time, even with NIL, even with the transfer portal stuff. It's just patience at the end of the day. And DeVries, I think he is going to be the guy to get Indiana back on the right track. I really do.
I think so too, but it's, it's monitoring expectations. If you come into next year thinking, Indiana's going to win a national title, go to the Final Four, do all these things, that's going to be very, very difficult. Yeah, you could say if you said the same thing about IU football going to the college football playoff. Yeah, 100%. But
that was crazy. That's a crazy rare instance that would never happen again.
Yes. And that's such an important thing to say because everyone's going to have that expectation of, a lot of people are, not everyone, but a lot of people are going to have that expectation of Indiana basketball. DeVries is going to turn the program around, rebuild the roster, and they're going to be competing for a national title. It's, it's not going to be the instantaneous type thing. Even look at Todd Golden at Florida. Todd Golden, his first year at Florida, they weren't the best team in the country. He took a few years. He built them up and he won a national title, Good coaches, it's not one of those things. You rarely see a guy come in and in year one just turn a team into a contender. It does not happen often. And it's important, it's a process. And Darian DeVries seems very committed to that process and his own personal process when it comes to coaching and building a roster and building a staff. And it's a lot to be excited about. But again, it's monitoring expectations and being realistic about, where the program is right now.
Indiana's got all the resources to help DeVries, what's the word I'm looking for? All the support really that he needs, right? And they've got the NIL budget, they've got the resources, they've got the facilities, they've got everything you possibly can. It's not going to take as long as what a lot of these other programs will, even at the high major level and stuff, but it's going to take a little bit of time. This first season, expectations should just be, let's see what's on the basketball floor. Let's see what kind of system he's doing, what his culture is going to be like. Let's see what that's about. And then let's start ramping things up year 2, year 3 and stuff. So it just, you said it right. It's apple to oranges. My advice is don't compare him to Kurt Cignetti. Don't compare Kurt Cignetti to Darian DeVries. Don't do any of that. With those guys, you do have 2 guys that look like they can lead the Indiana athletic programs in both football and basketball for a long, long time. And you've got the right guys to do so. Darian DeVries, it's just all about, the expectations are to win. This Indiana fan base wants to win. He wants to win. His staff wants to win. His players want to win. Just let it play out and see what he can do to make sure they're succeeding those goals.
Yeah, and I mentioned Todd Golden, year 1 at Florida. He was 16-17. Year 2, 24-12, lost in the first round of the tournament as the 7th seed. In year 3, won a national title. I'm not saying Darian DeVries is going to win a national title. I'm not even saying Darian DeVries is going to get to the Final Four, Elite 8 in year 3, or even the Sweet 16. I'm just saying these things aren't instantaneous. They take time. But again, we mentioned the process. DeVries is committed to that, and it's just be patient with that. Moving on from there, I guess the other quote he had that kind of was interesting, talking about his staff. We had the official announcements for Rod Clark. I'm blanking on
Drew Adams.
Drew Adams was announced to Kenny Johnson, and then
Nick Norton's was, I wouldn't say Nick Norton's was like last month.
Yeah, what's the Sam Houston one?
Oh, Justin Bailey.
Justin Bailey, yeah, who was kind of part of the Lamar Wilkerson.
That's what it looks like. It looks like it was. I don't want to call it a package deal, but obviously we don't have a whole lot of sources on that, so we don't want to speculate a ton on that. But you can probably put the pieces together on a lot of things. So we'll just kind of leave it at that. I forget what his title is going to be. I think it's going to be director of player scouting, or hold on, let me just pull it up at thehoosier.com on 3. Make sure you sign up for this exclusive information. So Alec wrote about it. Sources confirmed to thehoosier.com that Bailey will join the Indiana staff. The exact role is yet to be officially confirmed, but national insider Jeff Goodman reported that it would be a director of player personnel. So I think it's kind of a director of player ops, adobo, director of basketball operations and stuff like that. So it's a title, right? It's just a title to have on staff, and he's gonna have a role on this team. But it's a very interesting late edition, as you could say.
Yeah, great podcasting from us. I'm going to read the quote, though. So DeVries talked about putting together a staff. He said, make sure you have a lot of different areas covered both on and off the floor. Recruiting, regions of the country, and experience, youthfulness. There's a lot of things that go with it. Just like your team, you want them to complement each other. I love this staff that we have and looking forward to getting on the floor and working. I mean, a lot of experience across the country. Drew Adams, Bloomington native, helping recruit in the state. Rod Clark, who, a lot of experience. Kenny Johnson, another guy with a lot of experience. Like, this is, it's not a new, it's very experienced staff across the board. And DeVries, it's not like he's an inexperienced coach either. It's not like he needs that, but he is surrounding himself with a lot of talent, which is only going to make, the sum of its parts greater.
Yeah, and I'm not like I don't want this to be a knock on his other staffs that he had at Drake or West Virginia and stuff, but it's a staff that takes you to the next level, right? He's got a staff that covers pretty much all the bases. Drew Adams, his dad is Mark Adams, who runs the Indiana Elite Basketball AAU program, the top AAU program in the state of Indiana. He's also a guy that just knows the state of Indiana very, very well. He was on, I think he was on Tom Crean's staff a long, long time ago. I forget exactly what his role was at that time and stuff, but it wasn't an assistant coach. But you've got a guy like that knows the state. And then you got Nick Norton, who's been with DeVries for a while. He's a player under DeVries, really good at recruiting in the Midwest. Same with Drew Adams. I think those guys are going to do really, really well in the Midwest. Rod Clark, at Tennessee, his resume just speaks for itself. Tennessee got Dalton Connect, got Zakai Ziegler, got some really, really high-level players. Is just a guy that's really experienced, really good connections, on the AAU scene. Just overall, just a really good recruiter. I would bet that he's probably going to be Indiana's best recruiter when it's all said and done. And then Kenny Johnson, a guy that was with Tom Crean, in Indiana a long time ago as well. A guy that's also really, really good at recruiting, especially in the DMV area. A lot of connections, a guy that, really, really experienced. And then at the end of the day, when it comes to on-floor coaching and stuff, these guys know their stuff. And he's got a staff that's really smart, really intelligent, can really connect with a lot of these players and stuff. So it's a really, really good staff. Nobody, from last year's staff is on this current staff. So it's a completely whole new staff that DeVries has put together and stuff. But I really, really like the staff that he put together just because they cover a lot of these bases on the recruiting trail. And then as just a coach, when it comes to on the floor as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess the last quote moving on to is we talked about it a little bit, the front court. It's been a huge story all offseason. Indiana, I think tallest guy is 6'9". I think I want to say Sam Alexis and Reed Bailey are both 6'9". So they're the two tallest, if I'm not mistaken. But their quote, or DeVries' quote talking about the front court, he said, "I don't anticipate us having great rim protection. Like I said, we're a little undersized at the 5 position. There's a lot of different ways to protect the rim. Overall, on paper, I like the balance we have. I think there's a lot of things we can do, but that comes down to taking that from paper to the floor." And then he said, expanded a little bit more, "I feel really good about the 5. I like the guys we have. I think they fit how we want to play offensively. They have the ability to have the ball in their hands and be facilitators and playmakers. We have good depth there, and I like what they bring. There will be some nights they'll be undersized at the defensive end, but there are numerous ways to offset that. Size doesn't always determine how effective you can be as a defender or offensive player. The right mindset goes a long way, and our guys will bring that."
Yeah, that's definitely the front court's probably I don't want to say weaker because I think all the guys that he's got in the front court are very, very talented players, but that is definitely the questionable area, I think, for this Indiana team, right? The ones that you a little worry about because Indiana, under Mike Woodson, you always had these true rim protectors, right? And Indiana just doesn't necessarily have that and stuff. But I do like how DeVries stated it. There are ways to protect the rim without being 7 foot tall, right? There are ways to protect that. One thing, if you stop them in the perimeter game or whatever and stuff, that's a way to protect the rim. They're not getting to the rim. So, but he's got guys, positional versatility, Reed Bailey, Sam Alexis, Josh Harris. We'll even throw Trent Sisley in there as well. Tucker DeVries as well. I will totally see him playing a lot of small ball 4 a lot of the time. So, I like the front court. I like the front court. You do question it just a little bit from a size factor. But the way that he's got guys, kind of put together and stuff, the way this roster's kind of shaped up and stuff, there's just a lot of plug and play situations in this team. So, yeah, that is what it is and stuff. It's just kind of, you got to kind of wait and see. I don't expect them to go out and get a 7 foot rim protector and stuff. But here's the thing also, and I've been preaching this a little bit stuff too. with DeVries' teams at Drake, West Virginia, they didn't have a 7-foot guy. They
Yeah.
didn't have a guy like that stuff. He's never had that type of guy. So it shouldn't be a shock that he doesn't have a type of guy with Indiana. Maybe, year 2, year 3, maybe he's like, man, I really do need to have a guy that's just a true shot blocker in a lot of ways. Maybe you do see that when you get to the Big Ten play. But, this season, it's going to be a fast-paced team. It's going to be a team that can run up and down the floor. A lot of athleticism on this team. The guys that can get out into the perimeter and stuff. And we'll just kind of see how it kind of plays out.
Yeah, and I think you can make up for that, lack of size at the 5 across the board. You look at the rest of the roster, you have good positional size. Tate Conaway, 6'3", but at the point guard position at the college level, it's very solid. Mar Wilkerson, 6'4", Tucker DeVries, 6'6". And then just going across the board, you have Josh Harris, who's 6'8", Reed Bailey, 6'9", Cy Miles, 6'6", Trent Sicily, 6'7". You mentioned Nick Dorn, 6'7", Sam Alexis, 6'9". You're going to have a lot of wings that are going to be around that 6'7", who are probably able to guard some 4s, like 1 through 4, 2 through 4. And having that ability to switch and make it difficult to get the ball into the post is going to, it's going to go a long way. Because for Indiana, when you're playing those true 7-footers, those teams that want to, kill you inside, back you down, and, beat you in the post, you can't let the ball get into the post. So those wings and those guards using their length, it's going to be a big factor this season on the defensive end.
Drew, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think you nailed it on all accounts and stuff. I do think this team's going to be a scrappy defensive team. There's ways that you can protect the rim. There's ways that you can stop the 3-ball, with the guys that they have on this team. And I think DeVries will do a good job of putting these guys in good spots to succeed on the defensive end. If they can get steals, they can get live ball turnovers and score on that broken floor that DeVries wants to have. This team's going to be really, really fun to watch. So just kind of got to wait and see how it plays out at the end of the day. You still got a few months, left, a lot of months left. But, before you know it, it'll be the Puerto Rican trip. And then obviously, a little time in between there, Indiana football, all that stuff. And then it'll be basketball season before you know it and stuff. But we'll just see kind of how it all plays out and stuff. But good stuff, I think, overall by Darian DeVries. I thought he said a lot of really good things, a lot of encouraging things. He didn't BS around. I think he said a lot of things, that are true with this team and stuff. And he's not going to kind of sugarcoat anything. He likes what he sees, out of the 5. He's going to tell you, roster updates and stuff like that. I think he did a really, really good job, at the Hoosiers event. So highly recommend you go on thehoosier.com and watch that interview with him.
Yeah, a ton of stories too on the Hoosier website covering that. Also, one more point, not really my point, stealing it from Jim Coyle. He said on his show today, or might have been, was it today or yesterday? Or today? No, it's definitely today because it couldn't have been yesterday. Yeah. But he said DeVries looked a lot more comfortable, and it seemed that way, in the initial press conference. Indiana basketball is not West Virginia or Drake. West Virginia is a solid program. They have some history, but the magnitude, it's not Indiana. And it seemed like I don't want to say overwhelming in that initial press conference, but it seemed like it was like, okay, this is definitely going to be different. And yesterday it seemed, a lot more comfortable for him. He seemed a lot more at ease. And I think we got a lot more from him as a result. So good to see him his comfort growing, and that's only going to continue to grow as he spends more time in Bloomington.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his personality is not going to, be super charming or anything. Yeah. He's a basketball coach.
That's not Kurt Cignetti.
It's not Kurt Cignetti at all, but he's going to say a lot of the right things. It's very similar to Archie Miller, but not as bland as what Archie Miller is. I should
Don't say that. People are going to quote that, Kyler.
It's true. It's true. Quote it. Kyler Staley said it, so it's true. But at the same time, I think he'll be a much better coach than what Archie Miller is. So
yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to tell you guys, or you guys probably can see this. We're like 30 subscribers away from 1,000 on YouTube. So guys, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. Kyler, that was backwards, but close enough.
1,000, 1K.
Yeah, actually, everyone unsubscribed so we can get back to the 1 Kyler was holding up. But yeah, so guys, if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe. We are posting the scouting report or videos, breakdowns, reactions, podcasts. John Alden's in touch with Indiana sports. His show's on there. A ton of stuff on the Hoosier on 3 on YouTube. Also, if you're not doing it so already, check out the Hoosier on 3 on X/Twitter, and make sure you're subscribed to the Hoosier.com website. It's just $1 for the first month and then 50% off for the rest of the year. guys, you get access to the Hoosier Hangout message board, which has, a bunch of inside info recruiting wise. You see guys like Joe Tipton, Jamie Shaw, some of the lead analysts across the country, posting their updates and how it affects Indiana basketball, Indiana football on the Hoosier Hangout. So make sure you're checking that out. Thank you guys for watching and listening to the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast. We'll be back next week.